have Berger's helmet designed in any new livery that somebody would come up with, and that's what's happened. It's for one race only. Now, this is this really controversial corner. It's so slow, just 35 miles an hour, first gear, and it takes an age for the team, cars, the drivers, to be able to get the power onto this long uphill right-hander. But it does differentiate between cars, and those that have got good traction, and the Williams have had it, they really do benefit at that point. Now, let's see. Now, it looks like a Lacey's moving up the field from what we hear, and there indeed is a Lacey, so he has moved up the field. Now, this is going to be interesting, and there's Frenson there, and it looks like Frenson's moved up the field too, because we saw him start, I think, much further back than that. So let's keep an eye out. If that is going to be judged against, there is going to be a 10-second penalty. Now, watch the cars move across to the right. They're staying on the clean line, sweeping across to the right at the last minute so that they keep the tyres clean.
So, bad news, terrible news for Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Good news for Johnny Herbert, because he's now effectively fifth on the grid. And the right front is David Coulthard, the left front is Damon Hill, behind Coulthard is Schumacher, behind Hill is Gerhard Berger. You can see the last car slotting into position now. The repeat, there's the man with the green flag again, and let us keep our fingers crossed that the second start is a clean and a good one. There's the green, and Coulthard wheel spins away, but just a touch of wheel spin. Damon Hill has held his second position through the cement dust, and Schumacher goes ahead of the Williams. Michael Schumacher moves up into second place ahead of Damon Hill. Gerhard Berger is in third place. Johnny Herbert is in fifth position, and there is the Ferrari trying to get through further. Now already Michael Schumacher has got ahead of his World Championship rival Damon Hill. That's exactly what he wanted to do, because Schumacher wants above all else to finish ahead of Damon Hill in Portugal. Whether he's first or whether he's fifth is irrelevant to him, as long as he is ahead of Hill and denying Damon World Championship points. So we're now into turn 6 of the first lap of the 71-lap Portuguese Grand Prix, with David Coulthard, who started from pole position. That's Eddie Irvine with his teammate Ruben Barrichello behind him. Hill, Berger, Herbert, that's Jean Alesi, who is behind Johnny Herbert. Herbert sandwiched in the Benetton between the two Ferraris as they approach the end of the first lap in Portugal. Now, coming out of turns 12 and 13 to complete the lap. Now, there you see, David Coulthard is leading, Schumacher is second, Hill is third, Gerhard Berger is fourth, Johnny Herbert is fifth, Alesi is sixth, Martin Brundle is seventh, then it's Eddie Irvine eighth, and Rubens Barrichello in ninth position. And that is Alesi, round turn 1, dropping down to turn 2 at 150 miles an hour as you look at the Williams of Damon Hill, who's got it all to do on this circuit where passing, like most of them, is difficult, and the man he's got to get past at all costs to keep his hopes of the championship alive, never mind win the race, is Michael Schumacher.
Well, a great start there from David Coulthard. It looked as if he may lose momentum in the early stages. We may see a replay. But then he got it all together, he got the power down, and Damon Hill had to tuck in behind him, and indeed, of course, Schumacher swept through. Now, the situation we're seeing now with Coulthard out in front, Schumacher and then Hill, is exactly what David Coulthard wanted, because I believe that there's a very good chance that Schumacher is on a 2-stop strategy, and Coulthard and potentially Hill on 3 stops. Now, that should mean that the Williams should indeed be faster than the Benetton at this stage, and that could mean that Hill could get blocked behind Schumacher. It doesn't look like it at the moment, I must say. And we'll have to watch the lap times of these 3 front runners very carefully indeed. But also a good start from Martin Brundle, in fact. Brundle moving up ahead of Rubens Barrichello, who in fact was overtaken by his own teammate, Eddie Irvine there. So a few changes going on.
Well, we've seen the ability of Michael Schumacher with a heavier load of fuel than Damon Hill to keep up with the Williams. So we really don't know what the situation at this stage is. It could well be, but Coulthard on a lighter load of fuel by virtue of making more stops is going to pull away. The gap at the present moment on lap 3 in this 71-lap race is 2 seconds between Coulthard and Schumacher, and you can see the gap visually between Schumacher and Damon Hill. There he is. And it looks to me as though Coulthard is extending his lead marginally on this lap. He led in Belgium. He led magnificently after the restarted Italian Grand Prix, only to retire. But he leads for the third race in succession here in Portugal. The man from Scotland, from Twynham, who has yet to win a Grand Prix. Now this is that difficult hairpin where they slow right down to 30 miles an hour. 40 there. Then immediately up to 130 miles an hour on the exit of the right-hander into turn 11. That's it, it's just been completed, and now we're coming through to the end of the lap. You can see the gap there.
What that means is that on the first lap, the gap between them is 1.9 seconds, and it's extended. Coulthard is pulling away. He's pulled away 0.4 of a second on this first and second lap.
Now this could indeed indicate that Schumacher is going to be having a different fuel strategy, but Damon Hill, if he's on the same strategy as Coulthard, must catch up with and try so hard to get past Michael Schumacher. There's Damon. Now we're on lap 4 in this race now, and as ever it is the two Williams up front making the running. Gerhard Berger is in 4th position. Johnny Herbert is 5th where he effectively started. Sean Lacey is in 6th position, and Martin Brundle is 7th ahead of Eddie Irvine 8th. Rubens Barrichello 9th. Mika Hakkinen is 10th, and his teammate Mark Blundell is 11th ahead of the second Ligier, Olivier Parnis. Schumacher and Hill. See for yourselves. The Benetton is a revised car, like the Williams and like the McLaren. We're riding with Damon Hill now, pursuing out of the chicane Michael Schumacher's Benetton and not making up any time and distance on it. 0.6 of a second was the gap between these two on the previous lap.
Good view there of Damon Hill's steering wheel, the red button to the right of his left thumb. That's the cutout button. We're moving away from it now, but David Coulthard, let's see, and he was 2.6 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. It's now 3. Coulthard continues to pull away from Schumacher. He's pulling away at about 0.7 of a lap, and I believe that Damon Hill is now being held up by Schumacher. But at the moment, I'd say this fits the picture of certainly Coulthard on a 3-stop strategy and Schumacher on a 2, and Hill is going to be furious behind there. He will really know that the chances of him getting by Michael Schumacher in the next 15 laps, certainly until Schumacher stops, are slim.
Now, you know how many people started this race, and Frentzen was at the back in the Sauber Ford, having stalled it, and in his 5th position on the grid. He's up to 13th position in the race now. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the German driver in the much improved Sauber Ford, is really flying as you watch Gerhard Berger, lap 5, and he's 4 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. Less than a second separates Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, but more than 3 seconds separate David Coulthard, the leader, and Michael Schumacher in 2nd place. Berger out of the chicane. Behind him, Johnny Herbert, 2.4 seconds behind him. Look back for the Benetton. Johnny Herbert, the winner in Britain, the winner in Italy. He's in the points at the present moment, and 22 drivers are still in this race as through to complete another lap go the leaders, and the gap is extended further. Now there is Berger. You just saw a flash of Johnny Herbert's Benetton behind him. 3.6 seconds is the gap now on lap 6. We're almost at 1/10 of distance of the Portuguese Grand Prix completed already, as Gerhard Berger, the veteran Ferrari driver, who's already got 6 third places this season behind him, goes round in the Ferrari. It's not up to the Williams and the Benetton here. But you saw that the 2nd and 3rd men, Schumacher and Hill, are now absolutely together.
And as Coulthard's pulling away from Schumacher, Hill is pulling away from Berger, increasing the gap by about a second a lap. And Berger is also extending the gap between him and Johnny Herbert, but not by very much. Just 0.2 of a second a lap at the moment.
And yet again, Olivier Parnis, the Ligier driver, has been given a 10-second penalty. There's the confirmation for a jump start. That's the 3rd time this season he always vehemently and stoutly maintains after the race that he didn't in fact make a jump start. He just put it into gear and the car lurched a bit. The sensors must have picked that up, he says. But irrespective of the fact of the case, he has got another penalty. And now there was Coulthard. Here is Schumacher. Behind him, Damon Hill. The gap between Hill and Berger is extending all the time. It's now nearly 6 seconds. But Damon won't be worrying about the gap behind him. It's the gap in front of him. He's got to close the gap between himself and Schumacher in a Williams which we all thought was going to handle better. I remind you that Michael Schumacher was only 9th fastest this morning in the warm-up, and he was 3rd on the grid, and he seems to have done a lot of work on the car with his engineer Pat Simmons to make it handle as well as it is doing now.
And as we saw that jump start penalty for Panis, I think we ought to make it clear that Frentzen did indeed start from the position he should have done, which was right back, and therefore there is no question, I believe, of him having a penalty, a time penalty of any sort. He's still in 13th place at the moment, but sure to make further progress as the race goes on. As Coulthard continues to pull away. Now what's interesting here is that he's pulling away at a sufficient rate to enable him to make an extra pit stop over Michael Schumacher. To make a pit stop here takes about 25 seconds, and that means that if he can keep pulling away at about 0.4 of a second a lap, which he's more than doing, that will give him enough time, it will give him enough extra time to come in for that extra stop over Michael Schumacher if the current relative levels of pace are continued.
Schumacher and Hill, you saw the gap ahead of them. The gap behind them is almost as big. In fact, it's getting to be bigger now as Hill strives with all his might and main to get up with the Benetton. But on this track, which, as I said, like most of them, is difficult to pass on because, after all, there is only one ideal racing line on any Grand Prix circuit, Schumacher can position his car quite legally by following the racing line that he wants to follow as the man in front and make it so very difficult for Hill to get past, as into the pit lane comes Pedro Lamy from 18th position in the race in the second of the two Minardi Fords. And I remind you, his teammate Luca Badar started from the pit lane in the spare car. That's Damon Hill exiting the chicane, and that is Pedro Lamy in the pits, and it looks to me like a retirement. There is no activity of the mechanics around the car, and Lamy in the race that he most of all wanted to do well in, the Portuguese Grand Prix, his home race, is out of it. And now, as you watch Hill and Schumacher, second and third, chasing Coulthard, hopefully we have news of Ukko Katayama, who crashed at the first race start, from Tony Jardine in the pit lane.
Been trying to check out a report from Press Association that was saying that Ukko Katayama was sitting up and conscious in the circuit hospital here and talking to doctors. The very good news is from Mr. Takeda, who's the project manager for Yamaha. He has been talking to the manager of Ukko Katayama, Mr. TODO, and he confirmed that Ukko Katayama is indeed conscious. He doesn't have any broken bones, and he has been talking to his manager, so that's absolutely fantastic news.
Indeed it is. Race lap 9 of the Portuguese Grand Prix, and with Pedro Lamy seemingly out of it, the leaders have already lapped Jean-Denis Delatraz in the Pacific, his first Grand Prix for the team, and the battle continues. The battle between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, that's it for second place, and they are now 4.5 seconds behind the flying David Coulthard, and all the time I am believing that this is confirmation of the fact that Coulthard anyway is on a three-stop strategy. There he is, completing the 9th lap and into his 10th lap. Schumacher goes through 5 seconds behind him. Damon Hill is 7/10 of a second behind Michael Schumacher, and David Coulthard is controlling this race superbly, as he did the Italian Grand Prix at Monza before he had to retire from it. Is this going to be the race that sees the first Grand Prix victory for David Coulthard in his 21st Grand Prix? Well, this is lap 10. It's a 71 lap race, and there is the leader.
certainly hard to overtake here at Estoril, but it's actually hard to follow closely as well. And the reason for that is that with these very fast, long corners that we have on this circuit, the closer a car gets, and that's Moreno going very slowly. I wonder if he's just being incredibly obedient there, and or whether or not he's just incredibly obedient, or indeed, as we look at Pedro Lamy there, out of his first Grand Prix for Minardi on his home soil, the Portuguese driver. Now, back to the problems of following a car closely, and that's that when you do get very close to the car in front, you lose the effectiveness of the front wing of the car. And on the faster corners, the grip from the front tyres is very dependent upon that airflow over the front wing, and so the front will tend to wash wide. We can see Damon Hill following Michael Schumacher. He's trying to get close, but he's not close enough. Now, look through these next corners and you can see the point. Too fast, 100. This one's a 130 miles an hour corner, and even at that distance, Hill's car will be suffering from the turbulence coming off the back of the Benetton ahead. And if Hill was to get any closer than that, in fact he couldn't, because the closer that he tried to get, he'd lose front-end downforce, the front of the car would wash wide, and if you take that to its logical conclusion, he would drive off, simply go off the circuit, and that's exactly what happened to Mika Hakkinen here when he out-qualified Senna. Roberto Moreno did indeed have a problem there. He is into the pits. Is it retirement? It's certainly far too early for a scheduled stop. Bit of discussion going on. Hakkinen indeed went off and crashed. So Hill can't get a lot closer than this. That's the problem, and if he does so, he'll destroy those front tyres.
And if he did get any closer, I remind you that both he and Schumacher have got another problem, a political problem, if you like, and that is that they are both racing under a suspended one-race ban. That's Parnis taking his jump start penalty, which is going to move him down from 14th to a lot lower. So, subconsciously in the back of their minds, Damon Hill and Schumacher will both be saying to themselves, as Damon Hill said to me yesterday, if we're close to each other, as we were in Adelaide, as we were at Silverstone, as we were at Monza, we're going to have to be jolly careful not to put a foot wrong in terms of trying to get past. Now, the problem, therefore, is more Damon Hill's than Schumacher's. Schumacher regards himself as the innocent party at Monza. I was hit from behind, not my fault, he says. The Benetton team have produced evidence that he did not slow down on the Roger chicane, as he had been accused of doing, and that it was just a bit of late braking by Damon, presumably, that caused the problem. So the problem is Damon Hill's, and to get past them, that is a spinner, as you can see. It's the Ligier of Martin Brundle, Parnis. He's come out on colder tyres, of course, and that'll be the problem.
Well, I think this Parnis, he would have been on the same tyres, but he did just have that 10-second time penalty. I think simply trying too hard too soon. He may have picked up some dust and a bit of dirt coming out of the pit lane. That's not the normal line, but I'm afraid a mistake there from Olivier Panis, as Coulthard continues to pull out that gap, and he continues to pull it out at the rate of about half a second a lap, and that's as much as he needs to stay in front, assuming that he needs to make that extra pit stop. It's lap 11 now. If he's going to do this three-stop routine, I'd expect that first stop in about another 5 laps from now, lap 16, or thereabouts.
Looking good for Coulthard, looking good for Schumacher, currently looking bad for Damon Hill. Race order, lap 13 out of 71, second and third there, Schumacher and Hill. Leading them by 5.5 seconds, Coulthard. In fourth position is Gerhard Berger, 10 seconds behind Hill, and 5 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, who is in fifth place. Lacey is sixth, Martin Brundle is seventh, Eddie Irvine is eighth, his teammate Rubens Barrichello is ninth. Mika Hakkinen has come up in the McLaren Mercedes from 13th on the grid to 10th. He's passed his teammate Mark Blundell, who is 11th and started one place ahead of him. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, having fought his way up from the back of the grid, is now in amongst the quick men. He's right behind Mark Blundell and Mika Hakkinen. In fact, the three of them are racing together. Hakkinen 10th, Blundell is 11th, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in 13th place. And everybody up to the 17th position man, Luca Badella, who started from the pit lane, have been lapped. Schumacher and Hill, the chicane.
And looking at the rate that Berger's dropping away from Damon Hill at, Berger's lapping about 1 second, 1.5 seconds slower than Hill. I'm beginning to wonder whether or not, in fact, Ferrari might be going for a two-stop routine The pace doesn't look quick enough, although the Ferrari, it must be said, haven't been quick here this weekend. But we shall really know the answer, I think, in probably the next 3 or 4 laps, because if for anyone to be on a 3-stop routine, they will need to stop, certainly within the next 4 laps.
And this is Mika Häkkinen's McLaren, and we're in 10th position. And ahead of us is Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan Peugeot, exiting the new chicane, coming up to the right-hander at about 130 miles an hour, into the left-hander at turn 11, and now into the double right, turns 12 and 13 to complete the lap. And Mika Häkkinen hoping to exit it faster than Barrichello and take the place.
And of course the problem is, because of that turbulence, because Häkkinen can't close up during that corner, he just can't get close enough to Barrichello coming out of that corner to get a run on him down into this first corner on the next lap. It's a real problem, and why overtaking is nigh on impossible here. Interesting to see that we've got Frentzen now ahead of Bouillon. I'm sure that Bouillon let his teammate go by. It's the first time this year that Bouillon has been ahead of Frentzen, and of course the reason for that was because Frentzen didn't take the start from his group position when his Sauber stalled. Now what's going to be interesting to see, can Frentzen manage to overtake Mark Blundell, because we've seen few real overtaking manoeuvres so far. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th together. Barrichello leading Mika Häkkinen in the red and white McLaren. That is Mark Blundell, who is in 11th place. Behind him, Frentzen in the blue Sauber. Behind him is his teammate Bouillon. And it's close. And as Jonathan was saying, although they're together, it's by no means going to be easy for any one of them to get ahead of the man ahead, because of turbulence, because of the fact that their cars are so similar in performance. And it looks like Frentzen there has moved ahead of Mark Blundell. That would have been a very opportunist manoeuvre by Frentzen. It's a clean manoeuvre too, but I have to say, Mark Blundell has impressed me. He's out-qualified his teammate Häkkinen for the first time this year in qualifying. Now, whilst Häkkinen has reverted to the older and better, at the moment, specification MP4 10B McLaren, at the moment Blundell is using basically the later version, which is not as good, with some parts changed. And to add to his problems, he's also got this bad back. He wrenched his back this morning and is no doubt racing under some pain.
So, yes, Heinz-Harald Frentzen is now 11th from the back of the grid. He is amongst the fast men, but Frentzen's last lap, when he got ahead of Mark Blundell, was very close to that of Mika Häkkinen, who is now in 10th position ahead of the German in the Sauber. There's Barrichello. He's not. Behind him is Häkkinen. There is Frentzen. There is Blundell. Behind Blundell is Bouillon. And it's lap 15 in the Portuguese Grand Prix. David Coulthard has now stabilised the lead, some 4 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, who continues to be that 1.5 vital seconds in front of Damon Hill in 3rd place. It's the battle for the first 3 places that are tolerably close, because Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari is now well behind in 4th position, 6 seconds ahead of 5th place Johnny Herbert. Both the Benettons are in the top 6, both the Ferraris are in the top 6, both the Williams Renaults are in the top 6.
Now, let's see what Frentzen can do about Häkkinen. That Häkkinen just ahead of Frentzen, and in front of Häkkinen is that man, Rubens Barrichello. These 3 running in close formation. I think there's a chance that Frentzen could be running on a 3-stop routine, and that could be giving him an advantage. He may have a lighter car than the McLaren ahead of him, and particularly the Jordan. I suspect the Jordan is doing a 2-stop strategy, maybe the first stop round about between lap 17 and lap 20, but possibly more likely 3 stops for the Sauber.
Well, if that is so, then it's going to be pretty soon, because we're on lap 16 now, and it's from this point onwards that we would expect anybody who's on a 3-stop strategy to be coming into the pit lane to change 4 tyres and wheels and to take on fuel. I remind you that the fuel flows at the rate of about 10 litres a second. And we're back again with Mika Häkkinen. That's Rubens Barrichello ahead.
And we're shortly coming up to the park. We go round this hairpin, then through a right kink, and it was into the next. A little bit of a flick there from Barrichello, getting unstable. Look out for the chance of Frentzen coming up alongside Häkkinen anytime now. But no, it doesn't look like it. It would have been a bit of an ambitious manoeuvre, as Barrichello seems to be in a bit of trouble. I wonder if, no, Häkkinen hasn't quite got the run on him, but this is certainly consistent with Barrichello running a 2-stop strategy, having a heavier car that's being harder on its tyres, and Häkkinen's car and tyres being in better shape with him running with a lighter tank of fuel. But if that's right, it'll only be 2 or 3 more laps for Häkkinen before he'll need to come into the pits.
9th, 10th, 11th together. There they are. Rubens Barrichello, Mika Häkkinen, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and behind him Mark Blundell. With Häkkinen going for the place, and Mika Häkkinen sweeps through and takes Rubens Barrichello and moves up into 9th position, which will give Heinz-Harald Frentzen the opportunity. He's lapping faster than Barrichello, no doubt about that. You can see that he's already almost tucked under the rear wing of the Sauber. Here's a replay as Häkkinen comes out from under the rear wing of Rubens Barrichello's Jordan, goes through and moves up into 9th position.
Lovely overtaking manoeuvre there from Häkkinen, making full use of that Mercedes Ilmor power, the V10 engine being closing up certainly on the power of the best engine, the Renault at the moment. But now is the time when we would expect to see the Williams cars coming in for that first stop, and we believe that it will be Damon Hill who will in fact be the first to stop if that is the case.
Well, we have already had 4 runners in. We've had Delatraz in, we've had Moreno in, we've had Parnis who stopped, of course, but it is still the battle up front. Coulthard is on his 18th lap and Frentzen goes through, slows down and gives Barrichello the opportunity to retake it, but he doesn't do so. A demon late-breaking move by Heinz-Harald Frentzen gets him past Rubens Barrichello. That was a superb move. The German is really on the way here in the race in Portugal as he was in qualifying. He started from 5th on the grid, only to spin out, then to have to restart at the back for the second start when he stalled his engine, and he's fairly flying through the field now. The next target for him is Mika Häkkinen.
Brilliant overtaking there from Frentzen, but the tyre covers are off a set of wheels at the Williams pit. So look for a Williams. It's about to come in for the first fuel stop.
See there that Mark Blundell, there he is with Rubens Barrichello in front of him and Jean-Christophe Bouillon, the Frenchman, in 13th place in the Sauber Ford behind him. But now we are all eyes on the pit lane.
Because we also hear that Benetton have the tyre covers off. Now, I doubt that that's for Johnny Herbert. I would suspect it's for Michael Schumacher, and indeed it is Schumacher. Let's see if Hill can get out ahead of Schumacher. They are both in at the same time. Here is where pit stop routine, how slick they are, could make the difference. It could be Hill's chance to get ahead of the Benetton.
And that's the camera on the helmet of Les Jones, the Williams mechanic for it. And out goes Michael Schumacher, a much better stop than Damon Hill. Schumacher came in 2nd, Hill came in 3rd, and he's only now leading. A 16-second pit stop. That was dreadful for Damon Hill, and he's exiting the pit lane now. Now, where is he in relation to the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger? The answer is exactly the same position, because we're exiting the pit lane with Gerhard Berger. So, Coulthard still leads on lap 19, but Schumacher is still 2nd, having stopped. Hill is still 3rd, having stopped. Berger is still 4th, having stopped. So, now we're with David Coulthard. He's leading this race. If he's on a 3-stop strategy, it's very likely that he's going to come in on this lap. We don't know. Yes, he is. I think he's into the pit lane now. This is race leader David Coulthard. He's coming in now, certainly. Michael Schumacher will take the lead because, although he stopped, Coulthard did not have enough of an advantage over the Benetton to be able to stay ahead of Michael Schumacher 2nd. He should certainly stay ahead of Damon Hill in 3rd position. And I'm looking to wait and see. Out goes David Coulthard. Down the pit lane. And rejoins the track. David Coulthard goes back into the Portuguese Grand Prix, having had his stop. So it is Coulthard stopped, Schumacher stopped, and Alesi has now moved up into 3rd position, and that's Johnny Herbert, who was in 5th place.
Well, let's see how long that fuel line stays on for. The clock's ticking, 7 seconds. Now, that's consistent with a 3-stopper. That means Herbert's got 2 more stops to go. Now, what we did see was Damon Hill have that dreadful stop. Was it fuel? Was it something else? Well, he was actually in the pit lane for 8 seconds longer than Michael Schumacher and 6 seconds longer than David Coulthard. So clearly some problem, and it looked to me as if it might just have been a problem with the left rear wheel. But that's going to be a big blow to Damon Hill. He's now got to try and reel in 6 seconds worth of pace to close up to where he was on Michael Schumacher. And also what's interesting is that it looks like that in fact Schumacher is on the same strategy as Hill and Coulthard too. So the Williams really appears to have a performance advantage over the Benetton.
So David Coulthard coming through on his 20th lap, and this race is falling apart for Damon Hill, who allowed Michael Schumacher to get ahead of him after the second start of the race, up into a second position about which Damon was able to do nothing because of the difficulty of passing here. As you can see, Coulthard is now just over 4 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, and you may have seen the flash of the yellow markings on the Ferrari of Jean Alesi in the background. He's up into third position, so Damon Hill has got two problems. One is the fact that he's behind Schumacher. The second is that he's behind Alesi. The consolation for Damon is that although Schumacher has stopped, Alesi hasn't. So Damon should be able to get that third place back, but certainly not do anything about Michael Schumacher, who's now 4.5 seconds behind Coulthard. As into the pits comes Mika Häkkinen from 10th position. And out goes the McLaren. Nice clean stop, bags of smoke from the tyres as he accelerates out there on lap 21 out of 71. You're looking at the second placed Michael Schumacher, who is 4.5 seconds behind the commanding David Coulthard. They have both had their first of, we suspect, 3 stops for tyres and fuel, and Damon Hill is behind the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, the Canadian Grand Prix winner, coming towards us now. Coulthard. That is Taki Inoue, who is 16th. That is Michael Schumacher, who is second. Here is Jean Alesi, and right behind him, 4th place Damon Hill is setting about the Ferrari in an endeavour to get the third position back. The gap between Alesi and Schumacher is 9.7 seconds, so Damon Hill is some 10 seconds behind his World Championship rival now in third position.
Well, I'm not convinced that we are seeing, or that we just have seen, the first of 3 stops from the Williams. Particularly as looking at that stop from David Coulthard, he was actually stationary for 8 seconds, and that might have indicated an 8-second flow of fuel. Now, the fuel flows at 9 litres a minute, 8 nines are 72, and that means that that could be in line for the first of just 2 stops. And that could also be a reason why Damon Hill's stop was longer than that of Michael Schumacher, though still the amount of increase in length of 6 seconds over David Coulthard would indicate that there was certainly some kind of problem in that Williams stop. Now, furthermore, we had Häkkinen who stopped at lap 20. He had the fuel pipe on for a total of 10 seconds too, and lap 20 is beyond the quarter distance point. There we are, Mikko Sala in for his first stop. Now that'll be at lap 21, and that's certain to be, I think, the first of 2. I suspect that Häkkinen is on 2 stops, and that we may well see that from the Williams duo as well. And we shall only really know when we find out who has stopped by round about lap 40, because normally the second stop that these drivers make, if they're going to do 2 stops, it'll be a lap 45 for the second stop. If they're going to make 3 stops, I'd expect the second stop to be lap 35. So we're going to need to follow it closely, and if anyone has stopped before lap 40, it's a 3-stopper. If they haven't, it's a 2-stopper.
Now we're with Jean Alesi, third position. The car in front is Luca Badoer, the car behind is Luca Badoer, because Alesi third, Damon Hill fourth, both pass and lap the Italian in the Minardi, 16th position. The leader, David Coulthard, is on his 23rd lap. He is 5 seconds ahead of Schumacher. Schumacher is in 12 seconds now ahead of the battle between Alesi and Hill, and into the pits comes Mark Blundell from 11th position. Nice clean stop like Mika Häkkinen, and as Blundell goes out, let's join Tony Jardine in the pit lane, who watched the Williams stops.
It was quite a dramatic competition, a direct comparison between the Benetton and Williams teams as Hill and Schumacher came in together. And we, like you in the commentary box, were unable to work out why Damon was 8 seconds longer in his stop, other than they seem to be putting more fuel in. We're only speculating now that Adrian Newey called for Charlie Whiting, the FISA delegate, to come down to the garage, and he's been discussing quite animatedly about the refueling nozzle. We suspect at this point that perhaps it was jamming and the fuel wasn't going in quite as fast as Williams wanted.
Yeah, and let us remember there's a precedent for that with Michael Schumacher, where they were not able to get the fuel in quickly enough because of a problem with the fuel rig. It could well be that Damon Hill has got less fuel in the car after his stop than the Williams team intended him to have, in which case that would dramatically alter his strategy. Meantime, he's right up behind the Ferrari of Jean Alesi in third position. Coulthard still leading, nearly 6 seconds now ahead of Schumacher, who is 15 seconds ahead of this battle.
Well, that may be the situation. Now, that's Frentzen in for his stop. Now, let's see if he can get out and end up ahead of Mika Hakkinen. He was behind, and this is in a situation when good pit stop strategy really could make the difference. But my suspicion is that the right amount of fuel may have gone in that Williams, but it took a lot longer to do so. Indeed, 6 seconds longer. That would account for that tardy stop by the Williams team. We shall only know when we see when they come in for their second stops.
And if that is the case, I would fear that there's no redress for them. You can't claim back time, even if you can maintain that it was the fuel rig that caused the problem. So Damon Hill now is doubly cursed, if you like. And there is Jean Alesi in front of him coming into the pit lane. Damon Hill goes back into third position, but he's now 15 seconds behind Schumacher and 20 seconds behind race leader David Coulthard, who's on lap 25. So Alesi stops. Right at clean, wheels changed, fuel nozzle in, fuel nozzle out, Alesi out. 10 seconds, call that 80 litres of fuel. Now Damon Hill has got a clear track in front of him. He hasn't got an Alesi in his way. I suspect that if Hill could have got past Alesi, which he certainly wouldn't have done, I think, had Alesi not peeled off into the pit lane, the gap between Hill, who is now third, and Schumacher, who is second, would have been less than 15 seconds. Whatever, Damon Hill has got a massive hill to climb. We're on lap 25 now. Coulthard is leading. He's more than 1/3 of the way through the Portuguese Grand Prix, which is 71 laps long. David Coulthard, who has yet, for Williams or anybody else for that matter, to win a Grand Prix in his second season of Grand Prix racing, his first full season of Grand Prix racing. Damon Hill crosses the line to complete the lap. And in front of him is Mika Salo, the Finnish driver in the Seoul Tyrrell Yamaha, after the sad enforced retirement of his teammate Ukko Katayama at that crash at the first start of the Portuguese Grand Prix. And Salo will move over when he sees Damon Hill's Williams Renault loom large in his mirrors. He's a very experienced driver, and he does so. Salo, who is 14th, has now been lapped by Damon Hill, and of course by David Coulthard, the race leader, and Michael Schumacher, who is second, 6 seconds behind Coulthard.
Now, traffic's obviously now playing a part as Eddie Irvine comes in for his stop. Let's just see how long he's stationary for. This is the critical thing, all determined by the amount of fuel that goes in the car, assuming there are no mistakes. 10, 11 seconds, 12. Well, this seems a long stop. It seems a very long stop there at 14 seconds. And I don't really think there's any chance of them doing a one-stop strategy in this race. But anyway, on that last lap, Damon Hill actually closed. He took 7/10 of a second off Michael Schumacher. But David Coulthard was faster still. Coulthard's last lap, a 1:24.0. And at that time, Schumacher's was a 1:25.0, and Hill, 1:24.3. So still very close at the front end, with Coulthard still setting the pace.
And Michael Schumacher, very happy, I'm sure, about the situation in the race from his point of view, because although he is in second position and therefore on 6 points as opposed to a possible 10 for winning the Portuguese Grand Prix, most importantly, he's ahead of Damon Hill, 2 points ahead of Damon Hill, as well as 1 place ahead of Damon Hill. And if Schumacher stays where he is now, he will increase his World Championship lead of 15 points over Damon Hill. Only 4 races to go after this one. Germany, Aida in Japan, Suzuka in Japan, and Australia in Adelaide. There will be 40 points then, and Schumacher would be 17 points ahead of Hill. It's getting more and more difficult for the Englishman. But there's still a long way to go in the Portuguese Grand Prix. As ever, anything can happen. As we look at Johnny Herbert in 5th position, 15 seconds behind Gerhard Berger, and the race order on lap 27 is Coulthard leading and controlling the race, 6.5 seconds ahead of Schumacher, who is 17 seconds ahead of Hill, who is 10 seconds ahead of 4th place Berger, who is 15 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert that we're looking at in 5th place. Jean Alesi is 7.5 seconds in 6th position behind Johnny Herbert. Brundle is 7th, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen has now fought his way up after his stop to 8th position, but there's a massive gap between him and Brundle, a gap of nearly 20 seconds.
And significantly, Frentzen has indeed moved ahead of Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen down there in 9th place. Therefore, in those final few laps before Frentzen came in, coupled with the teamwork, the pit work from the Sauber team compared to the McLaren team, Frentzen has moved ahead.
The fastest lap, incidentally, is some 9 seconds off the lap record held by Damon Hill, but to be fair to David Coulthard, who has that fastest lap, lap 2, he is, of course, driving a car with a smaller engine than the one that Damon Hill created the lap record in. So it's Williams leading with Coulthard at the wheel. It's Benetton second, looking good for more World Championship points, because Johnny Herbert that you're looking at is on 2 World Championship points. 6 for Schumacher, 2 for Herbert. That would be another 8 points. And now you see Mika Häkkinen 9th. That's Rubens Barrichello 10th. Behind him, Mark Blundell, who is in 11th place. The 2 McLarens sandwiching Rubens Barrichello Jordan. By the way, Rubens Barrichello, the youngest driver in the race, has re-signed for the Jordan team to accompany his Irish teammate Eddie Irvine into 1996. Now, do you think, Jonathan, that the McLarens can be very happy about the situation that they're in now, 9th and 11th, with a car that they've had to return to an older specification than the one they came here with?
Well, certainly qualifying was the worst performance that McLaren have had all year, and it must be regarded as a major disappointment and setback when the evolution that you've been working on, McLaren were working for several months building up to this McLaren MP410C configuration, as Barrichello tries to find a way by Häkkinen, and Blundell nearly benefits from his effort, and to find that a couple of months of work at the moment are not working, and they have to go back to their previous setup for a team of McLaren sources is a major blow, and I'm sure there'll be some very serious heated meetings back at Woking after this weekend. But that's not to say that the 10C won't work. I suspect that there are aspects of it that are indeed an improvement. They need to be optimised, more testing required to get the best out of the package. But this is an excellent performance from Mark Blundell. I really am very impressed indeed. It's his first race after he got married. Following the Italian Grand Prix, Blundell doesn't have the same car that Häkkinen has. It's not quite the same specification. He's got that back problem, and really going very well indeed. His best race of the season so far.
So watch Rubens Barrichello. There he is in 10th position with Mark Blundell behind him, Mika Häkkinen in front of him, while I tell you that David Coulthard has got this race by the throat on lap 30 in 71 lap race. He's lapping faster than Schumacher and therefore extending his lead. It's now 5.8 seconds. Schumacher is lapping at almost exactly the same speed to the 10th of a second as Damon Hill, who is in 3rd place. And the first 3, of course, are lapping much faster than Gerhard Berger. And as you can see, David Coulthard now is right up with Mark Blundell. Now there's Barrichello, there's Blundell, and in the blue and white car behind is race leader David Coulthard. Mark Blundell will see the Williams. He'll know, of course, that he's about to be lapped. That won't deter him from moving over, David Coulthard hopes. And Rubens Barrichello is far enough ahead of Mark Blundell, I think, for the Englishman to let the Scotsman, David Coulthard, that we're riding with now, through before they get to turn 1. This is the end of the 185-mile-an-hour lap, and sure enough, David Coulthard moves to the inside. Politely, Mark Blundell moves over and lets the race leader lap him. Blundell is 10th and has been lapped, and David Coulthard is now closing up on 10th position, Rubens Barrichello to lap him.
Indeed, Coulthard lost just half a second on that lap compared to his regular pace without traffic. Blundell letting him by when he should have done, that's absolutely fine. And Coulthard will now have to hope that Schumacher doesn't get quite the level of cooperation, or certainly doesn't find the traffic in the optimum place, because in fact over the last 5 laps the gap between Coulthard and Schumacher has shrunk. It was 6.5 seconds on lap 26. On lap 30 it's 5.8. Now the crucial bit of information we'd like to know at this point is, are the Benetton of Schumacher and the Williams of Coulthard, and particularly Hill I suppose too, are they on the same fuel strategy? Now if they are, and if they are going to be on this 3-stop strategy, we're going to expect to see them make their second stop in about 5 laps time, round about lap 35, lap 34 for the second of 3 stops if that's the case. Now to have a really great race they'll be on the same strategy. What we wouldn't want to see from David Coulthard's point of view is Coulthard come in on lap 34, 35 and Schumacher stay out. But having seen how short Schumacher's stop was, I don't think there's too much chance of that. As Coulthard there goes by Rubens Barrichello, and in the background there is Michael Schumacher now behind Mark Blundell.
And Eddie Irvine is in the traffic there too. Eddie Irvine in 12th position behind Mark Blundell, and they were both ahead of Michael Schumacher as he came out of turn 13, the last corner. So David Coulthard has got a handy cushion of some 4 seconds, but he's past Häkkinen, he's past Barrichello, he's past Blundell, and he is past Irvine, and so Michael Schumacher has now got to get past those drivers that David Coulthard has already got ahead of, and we can expect the Scotsman's lead is now lap 32 to increase over Michael Schumacher, who is nearly 18 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. And unless something magical happens in strategy and stopping terms, it looks as though Schumacher is going to finish ahead of Hill in Portugal, which would be very bad news for Damon Hill's World Championship chances. You're watching race leader David Coulthard.
Now, whilst in the first stint we saw Coulthard have quite a clear advantage over Michael Schumacher, with Schumacher, Hill and Coulthard now on their second set of tyres, that situation is not applying. And in fact, all 3 drivers are lapping on much the same time. Hill was 17 seconds behind Schumacher on lap 26. He's 17.5 seconds behind Schumacher on lap 32. So he's in fact just lost a little bit. He's certainly not catching Schumacher. And all Hill can hope for at this stage is that Schumacher has a problem with his car, or an incident, or indeed that Schumacher is making a 3-stop strategy, when Hill maybe, if he has taken this much extra fuel on, he may be able to go on longer and make just one more pit stop by the end. But I'd be surprised, frankly, but we're going to have to wait and see. We've got another 3 or 4 laps before we know the situation.
Just about half distance, lap 33 in the 71 lap Portuguese Grand Prix, and as you watch Mika Häkkinen and now ride with Coulthard, who goes past the Finn and laps the 9th place at McLaren and now draws away from it. If you've just joined us, you may wonder why the Portuguese Grand Prix is running so late. The answer is that the race was stopped after Coulthard had got away well in front of Schumacher, who had moved ahead of Damon Hill, and Yukio Katayama was involved, the Japanese driver, in a crash with Luca Badoer's Minardi, Katayama in the Tyrrell, which turned the Tyrrell over, ripped the suspension off it, and Katayama was taken away from hospital on a stretcher, on a drip, and as far as we know, he's perfectly all right. The race was restarted some 25 minutes later. David Coulthard took the initiative from pole position and is now leading Michael Schumacher on lap 34 by nearly 5 seconds. But Damon Hill, who was passed by Schumacher after the second start, and Schumacher had started behind him on the grid, is now nearly 17 seconds behind his World Championship rival. Berger is 4th. Herbert is 5th. 6th position is the second Ferrari of Jean Alesi, who is only half a second ahead of Martin Brundle. 7th position, and Heinz Harald Frentzen is 8th in the Sauber, having started last.
And now, in the next couple of laps, we are likely to see pit stops if these drivers, and this is the most likely man, Michael Schumacher, are going for a 3-stop strategy. Now, Schumacher's first stop was shorter than anybody's, and indeed there is Gerhard Berger into the pits. Now that is entirely consistent. There we go, Berger confirmed on 3 stops, smoke pouring off those tyres. Now, I think that's a clear indication that all these front runners are going to be on a three-stopper. It'll be very impressive if they're not, and that means that in the next couple of laps we're going to have a wave more of pit stops, potentially led by Schumacher. He was one of the first in alongside Hill.
So here is David Coulthard coming through to complete his 34th lap. Gerhard Berger was in 4th position when he came in. There is Michael Schumacher, who has got ahead of Barrichello, who is in 10th position. So Schumacher followed by the lapped Barrichello, and the gap between Coulthard and Schumacher, first and second, Scotsman and German on lap 35 in this 71-lap race, is over 2 seconds, but the whole thing could change on pit stops. I remind you that Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher were together when they came in for their first stop. Schumacher ahead of Hill in second place, but Schumacher got out of the pit lane much earlier than Hill, who was delayed badly by some sort of problem. We don't know exactly what it was, but the result is that Hill is now 16 seconds behind Schumacher, and that is the German, and he's closing up on Mika Häkkinen's McLaren Mercedes to lap it, and he's in 9th place. So if, hypothetically, what happened to Hill happened to Coulthard when he comes in for his second stop, anything could happen in the Portuguese Grand Prix. It's a long way from being over yet. We're riding with Michael Schumacher, second place. Mika Häkkinen in front of him. Damon Hill is some 16 seconds behind the Benetton that you are looking at, and not at the moment looking like closing that gap. Schumacher in! Schumacher in! This is his second stop. Now I'm looking to see Damon Hill go past and to move up into second position. And I can't see because there's a massive crowd in front of me. They're all standing up, but I think that was Damon Hill going through. I think it was. Damon Hill is now up into second place as Michael Schumacher exits the pit lane, but it's a false situation in a way because Schumacher has already had his second stop, Damon Hill hasn't, so it may just well be a temporary situation.
Good stop from the Benetton crew there. Schumacher out, confirming he is on a three-stop strategy. And in the background, as we watch the Benetton crew at work, there were the Williams boys. They were getting ready for a stop. It looked very clear, and the suspicion is that that will be Damon Hill. He was the first to stop before.
Oh, Michael Schumacher down to third position, but on a fresh set of tyres, a comparatively light load of fuel. With 3 stops, it's in effect going to be a 4-part race for him.
And in fact, we heard that it's David Coulthard who's due to be the first of the Williams drivers into the pits. Now that gap between Michael Schumacher and David Coulthard was 6.3 seconds. So we know, on the basis that they're coming in on pretty much the same sort of laps, that these two drivers and cars are on the same refueling strategy. That means that we can compare the performance of them without the fuel issue coming into the equation. So we can say from that the Williams with David Coulthard is just a little bit quicker than the Benetton with Michael Schumacher. And indeed, Damon Hill being pretty much the same, although dropping back a little. So not much between them. There's no doubt Schumacher is very much in the race for this. Coulthard's going to have to keep the pressure up. Now let's see. 6.3 seconds Michael Schumacher was behind David Coulthard. And once Coulthard comes out of his pit stop, we can get an idea of just how slick the Williams pit work was compared to the Benetton pit work. But more than that too, we can see how effective Michael Schumacher is at getting into the pits quickly and getting out of the pits quickly. We saw as Schumacher came in at the back end of that Benetton, slid round. He was sliding the car, actually coming up the pit lane. And those precious tenths of a second all contribute to make Benetton provide Benetton with the performance advantage they seem to get even from the pit stop work.
And into the pits comes Johnny Herbert from 4th position. This is his second stop. Coulthard leading Hill by 20 seconds. Schumacher some 11 seconds. And was that Damon Hill? No. It was Martin Brundle, and so David Coulthard is some 20 seconds ahead of his teammate, but we just have to hold our breaths until Damon Hill has seen what he can do about Schumacher, until David Coulthard has been in to make his stop. And the covers are coming off David Coulthard's tyres. I can tell you that looking at the Williams pit crew, as through to complete the lap comes Michael Schumacher. Now Coulthard is 29, nearly 30 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, so potentially the Scotsman has got the opportunity certainly to get into the pits, change 4 tyres and wheels, take on as much fuel as he sensibly needs, provided there is not a fuel rig problem as we imagine there probably was with Damon Hill, and still get out in the lead. Seconds between him, 8.5 seconds between him and Damon Hill in second place. And the race order on lap 38 out of 71 as you watch third placed Michael Schumacher, and we wait expectantly for David Coulthard to come sweeping into the pit lane. Is Coulthard, Hill, Schumacher, and this is David Coulthard, race leader, making his stop. Everything's gone smoothly so far, unlike the situation for Damon Hill.
Well, precious tenths of a second, in fact, precious seconds lost by that right rear. They seem to have some kind of little problem with it. It didn't quite go on as quickly as it should have done. I think Coulthard's lost perhaps 2 seconds on that. Damon Hill now in the lead, but of course Hill has yet to stop.
But David Coulthard is ahead of Michael Schumacher. You probably looked back down the pit lane and saw Schumacher in the Benetton behind David Coulthard. So 2 stops completed for the first and third men, David Coulthard and Michael Schumacher, but not for Damon Hill. And there's the Englishman leading the Portuguese Grand Prix. A false lead, he's leading on the track, but remembering that he's got to come in and stop, that lead will disappear. And he's got a lot of traffic in front of him, which is going to cost him time, unless he's coming in. It's Bouillon in front of him, and Michael Schumacher, as you just saw from the caption, is in second position. Thinking, as well as racing. The actual mechanical details of controlling the car as Damon Hill goes through. He was pulling wide, and I thought he was coming in, but he was pulling wide to pass Max Papis, and now Bouillon. He's lapped Bouillon, who is in 13th position. Now he closes up on the 40 and goes past.
Well, Hill there at the moment leading, but he hasn't made his second pit stop yet. But the man behind him in second place is David Coulthard. Schumacher is just 2 seconds behind David Coulthard. Now, Schumacher was 6 seconds behind Coulthard before that stop. So Schumacher has closed 4 seconds on Schumacher's closed 4 seconds on David Coulthard, as we wondered. So great pit work, but once again, Schumacher does have this ability to get in and out of the pits quickly, and we can see that from his total length of time in the pit lane. That was 28.2 seconds. The Benetton crew did an equally good pit stop, I'm sure, for Herbert. That was 30 seconds. Coulthard was 30 seconds in the pit lane. So it seems that Schumacher, partly through driving, is able to save over a second on these pit stops.
Well, that is Damon Hill, and he's got to come in. And the lead situation is certainly going to change, and we're in for a tremendously exciting last 30 laps or so in Portugal, with the lead very, very closely fought for indeed. Hill goes over the line at the end of the 40th lap to lead the Portuguese Grand Prix. David Coulthard is in second place. Michael Schumacher is in third position. John Alesi is in fourth place, but has yet to complete that lap. Gerhard Berger in the second Ferrari is in fifth place, and Johnny Herbert in the second Benetton is in sixth position.
Well, this is very interesting indeed, because we have still got no sign of any wheels, tyres, covers off for Damon Hill. Now, the conclusion, bearing in mind we're on lap 40, is that the Williams team have opted to transfer Hill's strategy from being maybe 3 originally to going on to 2. And that would have certainly contributed as part of that lengthy time on the refueling. It wouldn't have added another 6 seconds, but it would have added another 3. Now, it may well be that if Hill's going for a 2-stop routine now, that he will only need to make 1 more stop. That's on lap 45, or round about that, another 5 laps time. And that means that the pattern of the race is going to take a completely different perspective, because Hill was pretty much matching both Coulthard's and Schumacher's pace on the previous 10 laps. And if he was doing that on more fuel, it makes that man, David Hill, look in a much better situation.
Indeed it is. Indeed it does. You can see Coulthard behind him, and Damon Hill is now coming up to Eddie Irvine's Jordan and Andrea Montemini's Pacific, and he's left the Pacific, of course, long ago. Now, Eddie Irvine is in the 11th position, and that's Rubens Barrichello, Irvine's teammate, who was 12th and has already been lapped. But as Jonathan was saying, if that is the situation in terms of strategy with Damon Hill, the finish of the Portuguese Grand Prix could be even more exciting than I thought it was going to be. And Hill has still not got right up with Eddie Irvine, never mind got past him, and will be suffering from the turbulence problem that we talked about earlier on. There's Irvine, 11th. There is Hill right behind him, race leader, effectively some 2.7 miles ahead of him, and right behind Hill is David Coulthard. Hill goes through and takes Irvine, who moves across and blocks Coulthard, who now moves past the Jordan. So you're seeing the race leader, Damon Hill, the second place man, David Coulthard, absolutely together. First and second in the Williams, as they were last year. They finished first and second in 1994. With only 0.6 of a second between them, but I remind you again that Coulthard has already stopped twice, and we don't know exactly what Hill's strategy is going to be.
Well, we hear that the tyre covers are in fact coming off for Damon Hill, but we still don't know whether or not he'll need to make 2 more stops or 1. This is absolutely fascinating now, because it may well be that the Williams team can have to adopt the strategy of letting Hill stay out there for as long as his fuel load allows, whilst David Coulthard gets slowed up, and potentially Michael Schumacher. Schumacher is 3.8 seconds behind David Coulthard, and if they are indeed doing a 2-stop strategy for Hill, that means that all of these 3 front-running drivers have got 1 more stop to make. Now, normally one would have expected, and then we can see a best lap there from David Coulthard. That was from very early on in this race, so clearly the pace having slowed up. And back to the situation with these last stops. If it's just 1 more stop for Hill, we would expect it to be a longer stop than that's for Coulthard and Schumacher, because we know that they're on a 3-stop routine, probably 3 seconds longer. Now that will ultimately, logically, let Coulthard through back into the lead, unless there is some kind of problem with the last stop from David Coulthard.
Well, the race is between the top 3, no doubt at all about that, because 4.5 seconds separate Damon Hill that you're looking at, David Coulthard that you've just seen, and Michael Schumacher, who is in 3rd place. And Jorna Lacey and Gerhard Berger, who are separated by only 1.5 seconds in 4th and 5th places, are 48 and 49 seconds respectively behind race leader Damon Hill. There he is, there is Coulthard. And in 6th position is Johnny Herbert, 7th Frenson, 8th Hakkinen, 9th Blundell. In 10th position is Martin Brundle, and the leaders have lapped everybody up to 10th place Martin Brundle on lap 44, this lap out of 71. Let's just look at and enjoy this battle. Hill, Coulthard.
Now, we've heard at this point from Goodyear that there is no problem in terms of tyre wear with the drivers just making 2 stops. So that also fits the logic for Williams of doing 2 stops for Damon Hill. And interestingly, these tyres, these slick smooth tyres, they start with just 2.6 millimetres of tread, and they can wear down, or certainly usable tread, they can wear down to 1.5 millimetres before they need to be changed. The front tyre pressures run at 21 psi and the back ones at 18. But this is interesting now, because I'm sure that David Coulthard knows that unless Damon Hill makes a mistake, and that was nearly one there, as Hill struggles on the older tyres, Coulthard's on the fresher tyres, tyre covers are off. This could mean that Hill is due to be in on this lap. Certainly, he's struggling to contain the increasing sliding there of that Williams car. Let's see, we're on the final corner. He'll come into the pits at the end of this corner, if that's, and indeed he does.
David Coulthard takes the lead. Damon Hill, who was leading until he came to the pits entrance, in again.
Now, let's look to see how long this fuel stop takes. If it is around about 10 or maybe 11, 12 seconds, that certainly is on line for a two-stop strategy. If it's about 7 or 8, it will be a three-stopper. There's the answer. I'm quite sure that Damon Hill has made his final pit stop. He is on a two-stop strategy.
Sensational! And there is the leader, the new leader, the man who led before. David Coulthard. Schumacher is up into second place, sandwiched between the two Williams Renaults, because Damon Hill rejoined in third position, way ahead of Jean Alesi, Gerhard Berger and Johnny Herbert, who are fourth, fifth and sixth. And brilliantly, magnificently, superbly, Heinz Harald Frentzen in the Sauber is now up to an incredible seventh position in the Sauber Ford from last on the grid, and he's only 3 seconds behind Johnny Herbert, and he's lapping faster than the Benetton. The closing stages in Portugal are really going to be great stuff. I've got no doubt about that. And we're with David Coulthard now, and he's coming up to the McLaren of Mark Blundell, who looks in his mirror, sees the race leader behind him, allows Coulthard through to lap him. Mark Blundell, who is 10th, has now been lapped by race leader David Coulthard. We're on lap 46 in Portugal. It's a 71-lap race. Now, you can see that Coulthard is in amongst traffic. You saw how close Michael Schumacher was behind him. At the beginning of the lap, it was nearly 4 seconds. It looks like less than that now. And certainly Schumacher is lapping faster than the Williams Renault as Coulthard goes through and takes Roberto Moreno in 19th position, 4 laps behind already in the 40. Closes up on Martin Brundle in the Ligier, who is in 9th position. Coulthard, the leader, catching Martin Brundle 9th. Michael Schumacher in the same way slicing through the traffic. Into the pit lane comes Gerhard Berger for another pit stop from 5th position in the Ferrari. Controlled aggression in the pit lane. Everybody's got a job to do. Everybody does it superbly. The wheel men, the fuel men, and of course Berger himself, containing himself until he can release the explosive power of that V12 Ferrari engine and rejoin the race. Now there's Brundle, and he has still not been passed by Coulthard, and Mika Hakkinen is stationary and out of the race, and he was in 12th position. Another retirement for the Finn, Mika Hakkinen, and that is the 9th time that he's retired from the 13 Grand Prix of 1995. Another miserable day for Mika.
So let's just recap at the front. Coulthard leads on lap 46 by 4.1 seconds from Michael Schumacher, who is 23 seconds now ahead of Damon Hill. Damon Hill has made his last pit stop. Coulthard and Schumacher both need to stop one more time. Lap 46 now, I think in 8 laps time, round about lap 52, or maybe less than that in fact, round about lap 53, perhaps 7 laps from now, we're going to see both Coulthard and Schumacher stop. Now that stop is likely to cost them round about 25 seconds, and so it's going to be pretty close. But the thing I think is going to mitigate against Damon Hill is that his tyres will not be in particularly good condition in another 10 laps time, while Coulthard and Schumacher will have fresh tyres. I think they'll come out of the pits probably roughly the same time as Hill is around, or a little bit ahead, if the truth be known. But the real battle is between Coulthard and Schumacher. Schumacher and the Benetton team took 4 seconds off Coulthard at the last pit stop. At the moment, Schumacher is 4 seconds behind Coulthard, so it really could be incredibly close. But another interesting point is that on Damon Hill's first pit stop, he was in the pit lane for that 36-second time. That included, of course, stopping. Now, on his second pit stop, he was only in the pits as Mark Blundell comes in for his second of 2 stops. Hill was only in the pits for 31.6 seconds. So it looks pretty clear that he had a problem with the refuelling amounting to about 4 seconds. And that, no doubt, is why Charlie Whiting was pulled down there by Adrian Newey. And it could be that that 4 seconds could could have influenced the result of the Portuguese Grand Prix here.
And what a gentleman Martin Brundle is, the very, very experienced Englishman from King's Lynn in 8th position in the Ligier Mugen, saw David Coulthard, race leader, bearing down on him, and at exactly the right moment, Martin holds his hand up and indicates to David Coulthard which side he wants the Williams to pass him on. Coulthard reacts to the message, passes him, and now has Martin Brundle as well as others between him and second place Michael Schumacher, as out of the pit lane goes Jean Alesi, having stopped again from 4th position, where on lap 48 as you watch Gerhard Berger go through. And here coming towards us is Coulthard, and behind him just one car separates him from Michael Schumacher. This is Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is now, or was, in the points. Amazing, amazing. And since Gerhard Berger has also stopped, it's getting very, very close indeed. Now, before those stops, and there is Coulthard. Look back. No, we're not going to be allowed to look back for Michael Schumacher. But it's Coulthard leading 4.3 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher on lap 49 out of 71. Damon Hill is third, a long way back. But remember, we're confident that Hill is going through to the end of the race, whereas Coulthard and Schumacher are both going to have to stop again. Alesi will have made his last stop, almost certainly. Herbert is in 5th place. Frentzen and Berger are fighting for the last point for 6th position in Portugal. This is lap 49. That is David Coulthard, race leader. Now, maybe we will see where Schumacher is. We need to have quite a long hold on David Coulthard somewhere, hopefully coming out of turn 13 into the finishing straight, as Coulthard gains on Gerhard Berger, who is in... And there is Schumacher. Schumacher passing Pedro Diniz to lap him for the 5th time. Pedro Diniz, the Brazilian in the 40, has been lapped 5 times in 50 laps by Michael Schumacher and, of course, by David Coulthard. And the gap is increasing thanks to the traffic which Coulthard has cleared, and Schumacher is still fighting his way through. The gap between race leader Coulthard on his way, hopefully, from his point of view, to his first Grand Prix victory, as Jean-Christophe Bouillon exits the pit lane. He was in 10th position, but the gap is 5.7 seconds now between race leader Coulthard, second place Michael Schumacher. That's the German, the World Championship leader, and that speaks for itself. Speeding penalty in the pit lane for Andrea Montemini, the Pacific driver who was in 15th position. And he will have lost that place to Taki Inoue now, the Japanese driver in the Arrows. And the race order on lap 50. 21 laps to go. Coulthard, Schumacher, Hill, Herbert, Berger, Alesi. 5.7 seconds separates Coulthard now. Is it going to change? Because here is Michael Schumacher crossing the line. He is now 6 seconds ahead of behind Coulthard. So David is increasing, in fact increased his advantage over Michael Schumacher by 0.3 of a second on the last lap. Doesn't sound very much, but every tenth counts at this sort of pace.
Well, as things stand at the moment, Schumacher is 21.9 seconds, in fact just now 22.2 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. We're on lap 50. I think the pit stop is going to cost something like 25 seconds. Eddie Irvine in there. Irvine in for his second stop now. We can see drivers either making 2 or 3 stops, but Schumacher is just 22 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. He's going to need 25 seconds ahead of Hill to be sure of coming out in front of him, and that's what Schumacher will be determined to do, because if Schumacher comes out behind Hill despite his fresher tyres, the chances are that it'll be Hill who can hold Schumacher off to the very end. And then, of course, we've got David Coulthard to consider now. Coulthard is 6 seconds ahead of Schumacher. Coulthard's got another stop to make. And clearly, just how long Coulthard spends in the pits is going to be totally in the hands of the Williams crew.
And even if Schumacher finishes third, never mind second or first, all is not lost from his point of view. If he can finish in the first three, he won't be at all unhappy. Andrea Montemini, the Italian driver for Pacific, exits the pit lane after his 10-second penalty. But there's 10 points for the victory, 6 points for second place, 4 points for third position. So if hypothetically Damon Hill finished second ahead of Schumacher, who was third, Hill would have only reduced his 15-point gap between himself and Schumacher in the championship by 2 points to 13, with 4 races left to run after this and 40 points still to be won. By no means the end of the championship, but if Schumacher can just keep plodding on, and I use that word circumspectly, plodding, in the top 3 places, he won't be at all unhappy, although obviously the higher up he can finish the better. We're on lap 52, 71-lap race. Coulthard leads over 6 seconds ahead of Schumacher, who is 22 seconds ahead of Hill, who is 43 seconds ahead of Herbert. Benetton first and fourth. Second and fourth. Williams first and third. Ferrari of Berger fifth. Ferrari of Alesi sixth. Brundle is seventh, and Frentzen, after his stop, is in 8th position.
And of course, Coulthard, Schumacher and Hill are all racing to win. Schumacher, in fact, lapped 1/10 of a second slower on the last lap, so Hill has closed the gap 1/10 of a second, and it was Schumacher who needs to pull it out. Schumacher needs to get another 2 or 3 seconds, I believe, yet, to be sure that in 2 or 3 laps' time, when he comes in for that third stop, he can get out ahead of Damon Hill. This is absolutely fantastic.
Dropping down to turn 2 at 150 miles an hour, keeping it up into turn 3, the right-hander. Now climbing turn 4 down to about 45 miles an hour on the apex, accelerating up to the kink of turn 5, 160 miles an hour. Brake hard for turn 6, second gear, 60 miles an hour. This is it. That's Schumacher. 7 seconds now behind Coulthard, who was nearly a second faster than Michael Schumacher on the previous lap. And that's Martin Brundle, who is in 7th position, 1 place off the World Championship points in the Ligier, ahead of Michael Schumacher. And Brundle, of course, has long since been passed and lapped by David Coulthard after Brundle let the leader through. Johnny Herbert, 4th. And he's 3rd in the World Championship. So things aren't looking at all bad for Herbert.
And we hear that the tyre warmers are off in the Williams pit. This must mean David Coulthard due to come in for his final pit stop within the next couple of laps. And Schumacher, I'm sure, will be in, if not on the same lap, within a lap of that. At the moment, Coulthard has now extended his lead over Schumacher to 7.5 seconds, with Hill still being 22.2 seconds behind. Hill is really going well now, bearing in mind that he's had that heavier fuel load. His car is certainly heavier because it needs to have enough fuel to get to the very end of the race, whilst the cars of Coulthard and Schumacher will only have about another 10 litres of fuel left in them.
As you watch Schumacher, I'll tell you that Hill is brilliantly doing what Ayrton Senna used so brilliantly to do. And that is maintain his pace, notwithstanding the fact that the tyres are getting very worn indeed. In the same way that Senna used to maintain his pace on slick tyres in wet conditions. And if Damon can keep this up, it's looking very promising indeed for him. You'll notice that Schumacher is not doing anything about really catching Martin Brundle, never mind getting past him, whereas David Coulthard made no bones about it at all. He closed up on the Ligier and went straight past, but the gap between the two of them, Brundle, who is 7th, nearly a full lap behind Michael Schumacher, is staying about the same. And Schumacher's just gone round in 1 minute 25.6. Martin Brundle went round in 1 minute 25.8. And into the pit lane comes race leader David Coulthard. And we think Michael Schumacher's coming in. Now, this is absolutely crucial, this stop. Remember what happened with Hill and Schumacher. Schumacher's gone in, there he is, and David Coulthard on fresh tyres with 55 laps completed rejoins the track ahead of Michael Schumacher. And and there is Damon Hill. Damon Hill. Wow! Lap 55, David Coulthard leads. Damon Hill is in second place, and after his stop, Michael Schumacher is in third place. Now, don't get too wound up. Remember, Damon Hill is on worn tyres. Michael Schumacher is on the minimum fuel load that he will need to complete the race. This is lap 55. It's a 71 lap race. And Michael Schumacher is not only on fresh tyres, but has got a colossal incentive to catch and get past Damon Hill and increase the World Championship gap between the two of them by 2 points by moving up from third to second. I said at the end of the closing laps of the Portuguese Grand Prix were going to be exciting. They certainly are. That is David Coulthard on lap 55. Seemingly on his way to his first ever Grand Prix victory. I'm not going to make any prophecies, but he is driven, as ever, absolutely magnificently in this, his 21st Grand Prix. Martin Brundle has come in from 7th position, and on lap 55, David Coulthard into his 56th lap now leads Damon Hill by 7 seconds. Schumacher is less than 3 seconds behind Hill. First, second, third, Coulthard, Hill, Schumacher. Herbert is way back, but he's in 4th position, ahead of Gerhard Berger's Ferrari and Jean Alesi's Ferrari. So it's still 2 Benettons, 2 Williams, 2 Ferraris in the top 6. Martin Brundle and Frentzen are fighting for 7th position, with Frentzen, I think, moving up to 7th place. He's had his stop, and Martin Brundle has just come in and gone out again. We won't know until the end of the lap. And Rubens Barrichello is 9th ahead of Mark Blundell 10th.
And we now have a straightforward race to the flag. No more pit stops for Coulthard, Hill, Schumacher. Johnny Herbert, I believe, has got to make a 3rd pit stop. But apart from that, the drivers' pit stops are all done. So we've got the fascinating prospect of watching Michael Schumacher on fresher tyres close the 2.8 second gap. There indeed is Herbert. This is his final stop. That's going to drop him down to somewhere probably 6th or 7th. He was running 4th. But Schumacher is 2.8 seconds behind Damon Hill. He's going to be on fresher tyres. They're all going to have the same amount of fuel in their tanks, enough to get to the end of the race, and therefore there's going to be no weight advantage for anybody. So we also saw, I think, Frentzen go by then, so that looks like we're going to see Herbert down to 7th place and Frentzen get up into the points for the first time so far. Now the question is, are Williams going to give David Coulthard, who's currently 8 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, instructions to slow up and allow Hill to overtake David Coulthard, who could then certainly fend off Michael Schumacher, because Coulthard's tyres will be in as good a condition as those of Damon Hill, as Michael Schumacher? Or are we going to see the Williams team let Coulthard, what I believe to happen, will that Coulthard with his better tyres should be able to lap faster than Damon Hill now. His tyres should be worth 3 or 4 tenths of a second a lap. It is now purely in the hands of, well, firstly in the hands of the Williams team. Will they give an instruction to Coulthard slow up? Secondly, if they do, will he move over and let Damon Hill by? On the first count, I think at the moment that David Coulthard is too far ahead at 8 seconds for them to do that. And as I understood it, the deal was that if Hill was clearly quicker than Coulthard, and that would mean following a minimum or at a maximum of 2 seconds behind Coulthard, they would ask Coulthard to move over. And on the second issue, well, I don't think David Coulthard is about to give away his chance of winning his first Grand Prix, because it looks pretty sure that he's going to be going to McLaren now, because we have just heard that Alain Prost has stated on TF1 that he will not be racing a McLaren next year, that he will be testing it though. That is a possibility. That clears the way for David Coulthard to join McLaren, and with McLaren's current situation, it may well be some time before Coulthard gets as good a chance as this to win a Grand Prix.
TF1, the French television station for which Alain Prost commentates, and of course that means that there's a Ferrari seat potentially for Mark Blundell, for Johnny Herbert or Martin Brundle. A fascinating situation, but not nearly as fascinating as the Portuguese Grand Prix. I find it difficult to believe that Williams would give Coulthard instructions to slow down, not just because he's now 9 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who is 4 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, but because if they did, there's always the possibility that Michael Schumacher could catch and pass both of them. unlikely, I agree, but quite possible. And that would really leave the Williams team with egg on their faces. But at the present moment, on lap 58 in this 71-lap race, with all looking well for the three men at the front as they fight for positions, it's David Coulthard from Twynham in Scotland, leading Damon Hill, who is now he's 9.2 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. Schumacher third, Berger fourth, Alesi fifth, and Frentzen is in the points at sixth position.
The important thing there was that Coulthard had indeed pulled away from Damon Hill. The time in brackets was the time on the previous lap. That was an 8.9 second gap. It's now a 9.3 second gap. That is exactly as we would expect, because Coulthard's tyres are virtually fresh. He's only been out of the pits about 2 laps, whereas Hill, of course, made that second pit stop on round about lap 45. So his tyres are going to be fairly well worn, and we know that that makes a big difference here. But Schumacher is maintaining that 2.9 second gap behind Damon Hill. It, in fact, was as far back as 4.1, so he's, I beg your pardon, he has in fact closed the gap a little, but closing it's one thing, getting by is something else. But the best battle that we're likely to see for the next few laps is going to be between the two Ferrari drivers, because Gerhard Berger is currently in 4th place, and he has made 3 stops, and Alesi is right behind him, having made 2 stops on 1.8 seconds back. Now, in theory, again, Berger should be able to pull away, unless he's got any kind of a problem, because he should be the man on the fresher tyres.
And just put this in your mind, that Michael Schumacher there and Damon Hill, who is ahead of him on the track, have had this collision 3 times, in Adelaide in Australia last year, at Silverstone this year, in Italy this year. Now there they are. Schumacher is gaining on Damon Hill, and soon he's going to be in a position to pass, and he will have to be very careful indeed about how and when he does it. But there is something else to be considered in the situations in the past, the 3 situations in the past where Schumacher there and Hill ahead of him have collided. It has always been Schumacher in front in Adelaide and at Silverstone and in Italy. This time he is behind. Damon Hill will be able to make his car very wide indeed, absolutely legally, by staying on the racing line and just perhaps moving an inch this way or an inch that way. But even if that was not the case, I'm talking as though there was a big performance differential between these 2 cars. They've both got the Renault V10 engine. They're very, very evenly matched in terms of car performance and driver ability. The only thing that they're not evenly matched on at the moment on this lap 60, as Schumacher gets closer and closer and closer to Hill, is tyre performance, and I think that is going to make the decision. Damon Hill is inevitably going to have to, I think, yield on tyre grip alone to the very determined Michael Schumacher and lose 2 World Championship points in the process.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see exactly what does happen, because this is, as we've said so often, a notoriously difficult circuit to overtake on. Schumacher knows that he can't take any real chances, because both these drivers are racing under suspended bans. Damon Hill, just for this one race, he was given a 1-race suspended ban for colliding with Michael Schumacher at Monza. Monza was given a one-race ban suspended for 4 races at the Belgian Grand Prix for weaving in front of Damon Hill. So neither can afford to get involved in controversial circumstances here. But whilst Benetton are the team who have been famous for having creative, optimizing refueling strategies, I think this is one race where Williams have done just that, because when they saw that Hill was third behind Schumacher, they then looked for a way of exploiting the refueling strategy to get Hill back out in front, and that's what they've done with this by converting what I suspect was originally going to be a 3-stop strategy into a 2-stop strategy. They've done the crucial thing, and that's get their man, Damon Hill, out in front of Michael Schumacher. For how much longer, we may wonder, but Hill's out in front of Schumacher, and the question is, how much longer can he hold it off for? We're on lap 60, there are another 11 laps of this race to go. There's no question that Schumacher is going to be all over Damon Hill's back for those 11 laps potentially, or if he can find a way by, then we're going to see something very close indeed, because Hill's going to know that his championship hopes survive, or will survive, on being able to keep Schumacher behind him and yet not doing anything controversial. A real challenge.
I remember the Monaco Grand Prix of 1992, when Ayrton Senna got ahead of Nigel Mansell into the lead in the closing laps, when Nigel came in to make what turned out to be an unnecessary tyre stop, when tightening a nut would have done the job for him. And Nigel was swarming all over the gearbox of Senna's McLaren, but failed to get past. Now, admittedly, Monaco is a very different track to this one. Schumacher has a look, and it's at the new chicane that Damon Hill is going to have the maximum trouble, because on worn tyres, when they come out of that at about 30 miles an hour and put the power down, if you haven't got the maximum amount of grip for the circumstances, you can easily fishtail, and that is where Damon Hill passed Coulthard last year, and it's where Schumacher comes right up alongside Hill and goes through, and this time there is no collision. I can almost see their minds working as Damon Hill kept away from the Benetton and allowed Michael Schumacher on lap 62 out of 71 in Portugal to move ahead of him up into second place to increase the World Championship gap by a further 2 points. But Schumacher is now 11.3, or on previous lap was 11 points. He's 12 seconds now behind Coulthard.
Well, there we can see the manoeuvre that did it, and I think Damon Hill was a little bit slow there. He could have quite rightfully taken the inside line, and that would have prevented Schumacher from getting by at that point. And bearing in mind the state of his tyres, that was a reasonable thing for Hill to have done. But ironical, in fact, that the corner that last year gave Hill the opportunity to get by his teammate, and that's exactly what Hill did to Coulthard last year, has been reversed upon him, and now it's Michael Schumacher who's exploited the difficulty of that corner to get by Damon Hill, and this could be fundamental to the World Championship this year.
It is possible that, in effect, Michael Schumacher that you're looking at could wrap the World Championship for 1995 up in his home country at the Nürburgring near Cologne next Sunday. There are 2 Grand Prix on successive weekends here in Portugal and next week in Germany. And if Schumacher finished 17 points ahead of Damon Hill, with 40 points still to be won, it wouldn't be all lost, but it would be very, very difficult for Hill, and it would depend on Schumacher having to retire from a race or races. But now this is lap 64, and you can see that on the new Goodyear rubber, Michael Schumacher is extending the lead over Damon Hill, but of course he's still in second place behind Coulthard, Hill third, Berger fourth, and he's just 1.5 seconds ahead of his teammate Jean Alesi, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen is now 3.6 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, and it looks as though Frentzen in the Sauber is going to go up into the points yet again this season, and that would be for the 6th time. An excellent performance in a car with the Ford Z-Tech V8 engine, which is getting better and better meeting by meeting, particularly here. There's been a bigger improvement for the Sauber from Italy to here than there has been any previous race this year.
Well, there might be only 8 laps to go of this Grand Prix, but Schumacher is certainly not giving up. He lapped half a second faster than Coulthard on his last lap. He's now 11.5 seconds behind, and he lapped 1.2 seconds faster than Damon Hill. So that's how much Hill was slowing up that man. We're looking at him now. There's the gap. He's closed it a little bit more. It was 12.2 on the previous lap, 11.4 now. It doesn't look like there's going to be any way that Schumacher's going to have a chance of wresting the lead from Coulthard. If he continues to close at the rate of even 1 second a lap, he'll still be 3 seconds behind at the end of the race. So I think now, mechanical fortunes allowing, and we mustn't forget that David Coulthard has retired from Grand Prix this year no less than 5 times due to mechanical failure. But if that doesn't happen on this occasion, this really will be David Coulthard's first win, and very richly deserved indeed. And Schumacher is going to have to just do the best he can, trailing home in second place. But the important thing as far as Schumacher's concerned is that he's ahead of Damon Hill, and he's going to end up with 2 points more than Hill in his quest to try and secure the championship as early as he can.
Yeah, while you were talking, Jonathan, as Coulthard passes Verdure again, I was doing a bit of quick mental arithmetic, and let me make it clear that Schumacher cannot, in fact, win the World Championship at the Nürburgring. I didn't mean that. He can, in fact, make it very, very difficult for Damon Hill. But anyway, we're in Portugal, not in Germany, and we're on lap 65, and you're watching a very cool, a very calm, a very collected, and a now very experienced David Coulthard, who has been a kart champion, Formula 4 champion, Vauxhall Lotus champion. He wasn't a Formula 3 champion, but then he moved up into Formula 3000 and finished third in the European Championship before he got his chance as a tester with the Williams team, which turned into a driver for the Williams team after the tragic death of Ayrton Senna. And now in his 21st Grand Prix, in his second season. He's not yet a winner, but he's not very far from it.
Easy to look at these cars as they now appear to glide round the circuit here at Estoril and forget just the tremendous stress that is on those cars. They can accelerate at about 1.5 G. That's twice the violence of a road car braking maximally. They can corner at 3.5 G, and they can brake too at 3.5 G. And the reason that they can do that is because of the phenomenal grip from those tyres. Frank Williams looking on. The grip from the tyres together with the wings and the downforce that those wings produce is really quite fantastic. And as you watch David Coulthard go around, as he comes through the left-hand hairpin, that was where Michael Schumacher managed to slip by Damon Hill, up round to the next left-hander into the final corner. Coulthard's going to be accelerating up through the gears. He'll be doing 130 now, 140. Those wings really pushing that car down into the ground. That's what creates the phenomenal cornering speed. And as he comes down at the end of this straight at maximum speed, the downforce is equivalent to 6 people standing on the front of that car and 9 people standing on the rear. It's quite phenomenal. Everything gets distorted. Half of the actual movement of the car going downwards, and it's not very much, comes from squash from the tyres, and half comes from the movement of the suspension.
Johnny Herbert grappling, I think that's the right word, with the Benetton. He hasn't been at all happy with this car all season, and that was just a bit of paper blowing across the course. Herbert is coming up to lap Luca Badar, who is down in 14th position. We're on lap 67 now, so there's lap 68, 69, 70 and 71 after this. 4 laps to go between David Coulthard and the first Grand Prix in his career, in his 21st race. He's comfortably staying over 11 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill is still in 3rd position. 4th is still Gerhard Berger, and incidentally Hill is now nearly 7 seconds behind Schumacher. There's no question of him doing anything about getting 2nd place unless Michael Schumacher has a problem, which doesn't look likely historically. The Benetton and the Renault are both historically extremely reliable. Gerhard Berger and Alesi in the Ferraris are still 4th and 5th. Frentzen is the last point scorer at the moment, ahead of Herbert 7th, Brundle 8th, Blundell 9th, Irvine 10th, Barrichello is in 11th place, and Bouillon is 12th, and only 5 people, down to Jean Alesi, are on the same lap. And now we're on lap 68.
And it was so good to see that clean manoeuvre when Michael Schumacher there went by Damon Hill. And I'm sure that the strong line that the FIA have had with regard to incidents played something towards that. But that was the right sort of way to handle that. And incidentally, referring back to the Monza crash when Hill ran into the back of the Benetton of Schumacher, Benetton issued a press release just to make sure that those people who wondered whether or not there was any chance of Schumacher brake testing Hill were firmly quashed. And in that press release, they said that they had looked at the data from the cars, and on the lap when Hill ran up into the back of Schumacher, Schumacher actually braked 8 meters later than on his previous laps, and when he was hit, he was going faster than he had done on previous laps. And it was that information, certainly, that I'm sure was taken into account when the FIA banned Damon Hill for that one race. And that's again, it's only a suspended ban, assuming that he gets through this race without incident, and he's sure to now. That will no longer apply. And I think we're going to see, and I really hope, we're going to see completely clean racing between these two, between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill for the remainder of the year. And indeed, I think the stories of there being a real feud between these two have really been built up out of all proportion. Quite frankly, in Monza, it could have been anybody in front of Damon Hill that got hit, and the fact it was Schumacher was incidental.
riding with Schumacher, about to lap his 7th placed teammate Johnny Herbert, who obviously makes no attempt to resist Schumacher going past. And Michael now is on his 69th lap in this 71 lap race in 2nd place, on his way to 6 World Championship points, further to increase his lead over Damon Hill from 15 points to 17 points, provided Hill stays exactly where he is, and provided Coulthard does the same thing. And it's still Ferrari, Sauber, 4th, 5th and 6th. And Michael Schumacher can be very proud of his performance in this race, as in virtually every other race, with 6 wins behind him this season already. This, funnily enough, is going to be his first 2nd place if he finishes in that position. Although he's been in Argentina, he was in 3rd position. And just as a matter of interest, David Coulthard has been on the podium 6 times for 2nd and 3rd places in his 21 race career, but never the top step. It looks as though he's going to be there today. This is lap 69, coming to the end of it.
Well, Schumacher's closing there, closed by half a second, but it's immaterial. Only 3 more laps to run. David Coulthard has sensibly backed off his pace and is now simply cruising around. 2 laps to go. There we are. Now back in 4th and 5th place, we've got the 2 Ferraris, and incidentally, the Ferrari drive and the 2nd Sauber drive, alongside Frentzen, are the only 2 major drives that haven't been sealed. And in line for Ferrari testing next week to try and work out who will take that seat alongside Schumacher is Martini, Badoa, Fisichella, Morbidelli, who used to drive the footwork, and Larini. And my guess is that Larini or Morbidelli should be in with a good shout of that one.
There will be people who criticise the situation if that is the case, with drivers of the calibre of Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle and Mark Blundell available, but that's Ferrari's business and not mine. What is my business, and everybody who is backing David Coulthard, particularly his chums at the Star Hotel in Twynham, who are always there cheering him on, is that Coulthard is on his last lap but 1, and he is a very comfortable 8.4 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, really looking as though, after all the misfortunes he's had, not just with problems he's had of going off, but primarily with reliability problems in the Williams, which hasn't been the most reliable car of the year so far. David Coulthard is now on his last lap, on his way to his first win.
And I am thrilled that David Coulthard will take his first win. It's been something which I'd anticipated for over a year now. Been on pole position emphatically in Monza, pole position clearly here at Estoril. He's driven a faultless race. He had the confidence to win. Team orders have played no part whatsoever, and it really is a very richly deserved result for Coulthard. Michael Schumacher has driven with that typical precision. He's made no mistakes, but the Benetton has been no match for the Williams here, and frankly it probably won't be on most of the circuits left. But importantly for Schumacher, he's kept ahead of Damon Hill. Hill certainly got delayed by that first problematic fuel stop, and it may have made a difference. I suspect not. And this could mean that Damon Hill's championship challenge is really over. Ferrari's 4th and 5th, but Heinz-Harald Frentzen 6th place, a point, a poor reward for what's been a superb performance from Frentzen and the Sauber team this weekend.
13 corners on this lap. This is turn 10. The left-hander is turn 11, and David Coulthard is now entering turn 12 and 13, which lead into each other. The last corner on the Portuguese Estoril course, within sight of the checkered flag, which he sees now brilliantly to win his first Grand Prix. He wins it in Portugal. He takes 10 World Championship points for himself and the team, and Michael Schumacher finishes, I'm sure, a very contented second, 6 points, but importantly 2 points ahead of Damon Hill, who's coming home in 3rd position. Is not yet home, incidentally, in 3rd position. There he is across the line. Coulthard, Schumacher, Hill. Consolation for the Williams team, of course, is the fact that Coulthard on 10 points and Hill on 4 are closing the Constructors' Championship gap to Benetton, which was 20 points, is now 12 points, because Johnny Herbert is going to finish in 7th place out of the points. And that's the delighted Williams team. with Frank himself, as ever, looking at the monitor. And in Portugal, we have seen history made by this young Scotsman, a tremendously determined and likeable chap who, thanks to the backing and consistent support of his father Duncan and his mother Joyce, who have done everything that a father and mother could to help a son get on in the world that he wants to do well in, David Coulthard has won his first Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher closes up alongside him. And knowing Schumacher as I do, I suspect he's going to look across and wave at him and grin behind his helmet and say, well done, David, you beat me fair, you beat me square. And as Jonathan was saying, it was really good to see that clean passing manoeuvre between Schumacher and Hill, where Schumacher passed Hill at the same place where Hill had taken the lead from his teammate David Coulthard last year, cleanly to go ahead and resolve any concerns that we had that there might be a fourth coming together between the Benetton and the Williams. But in Portugal, there is the man. He dominated the qualifying by taking pole position, as he had at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix 2 weeks ago. But unlike Monza, where he first of all went off on the parade lap and then subsequently had to retire, having led the race, David Coulthard kept his advantage to win here at Estoril.
And this is always a rather tense time, not for the drivers though, but for the team managers, because the cars are all being directed into the Parc Ferme. That's Charlie Whiting there with the blue shirt. He is responsible for supervising the scrutineering. Isn't that wonderful? Schumacher is genuinely delighted there for David Coulthard. Certainly no repeat of the conversation that was between Schumacher and Hill at Belgium that we all thought was one of congratulations. This time it genuinely is, and Schumacher, I'm sure, will respect the job that Coulthard has done. But they have to hope, as I was saying, that the cars, when they're checked, all pass all of the complex technical regulations. Last year, Hannes was excluded in the Ligier because the floor of his Ligier had worn down to be too thin. I'm sure that is going to be the case. I very much hope so, because I think the result today has been a very fair one indeed. But look how fresh David Coulthard looks. 24 years old, his first Grand Prix win, and a huge future in front of him.
But, question mark, what happened to Damon Hill on that pit stop of his? There he is, congratulating his teammate on his first win. But why did it take so long? What was Adrian Newey, the Williams